For long-term fitness success, you must eliminate the victim mentality. If you want to do well, you have to embrace responsibility and you have to feel empowered, not disempowered.
Ooh,
I know.
Personal accountability. That's
it.
hard.
You know, it's
what's driving this message today?
Oh, I tell you, it's how politics is now getting into fitness and nutrition. That's the issue. And I see this body acceptance movement continue to become distorted and twisted and grow. And what they're doing is they're taking, obviously there was one side that was wrong of how fitness and health were promoted, right? It was about being ripped and being extreme. And then they went in the other direction, saying things like, this is healthy, when obviously it's an obese individual. And this means I love my body, when obviously they're displaying that they don't love themselves in the truest sense. And what that promotes is it promotes this victim mentality where, yeah, you know, I'm obese, but it's my genetics, or I'm obese and it's because I grew up in this particular neighborhood, or because of the food that I didn't have access to, or because of whatever, that I don't have control. I'm not empowered, which is it's anti long-term success in health and fitness. Because the only way to really make it work long-term is to accept full responsibility and move forward. Also accept the limitations. Fine, I don't have the genetics that are gonna let me be a professional athlete, or I don't have the genetics that are it's going to make it where I can walk around shredded with a six-pack all the time. That's fine. I accept that. I'm going to move forward anyway. So
I heard a neat analogy. I think Jen Cohen was interviewing somebody. I wish I remember who it was, but it was a small clip, and it was talking about this, and he was talking about that we're all dealt different cards, but it's not about the cards that you're dealt, but it's about how you play the hand.
Always.
And he gives like the poker analogy of like, I've seen somebody with, pocket twos win $1 million in poker because the way they played their hand. And I've seen people with, a full house and lose all this money because of how they played their hand. So you could come from this super privileged situation, but also become a drug addict, a loser, and fuck all those great cards up. The same that you could come from absolutely nothing and not have anything, or not have a favorable hand, and actually be someone who turns out to be a superstar.
Yep.
So it's less about what you're dealt, and it's more about how you deal with
and
those
the way
cards.
I look at it is I look at it like this, like forget, being the best in the world or being the worst in the world. Everybody has a potential, and it's a wide range. Like think about it this way. How far down and dark do you think you could get if you made just terrible, bad decisions your entire life? Like that potential's massive, right? Well, there's an equally high potential for how well you could do if you made good decisions, if you took responsibility, if you worked hard, if you were honest, and you did the right things. So that's your potential. Accepting that you can't change certain things is part of working towards that. And then accepting your responsibility and saying, I'm going to focus on what I can do. And look, we've all had those clients that you could tell that they were going to be successful because they had this attitude, or you could tell they weren't going to be successful. Like when I had a client that was all about excuses, all about, just feeling like a victim and poor me. Like if I couldn't get them to change that mentality, I knew it was going to fail. They weren't going to be able to do this. They weren't going to be able to improve their health in any meaningful way, or at least not for long term.
Well, one message is empowering and moves you in positive behavioral changes, and one message, really just is negative. It takes you, it provides you with answers and keeps you in a place where, you're already, not doing too well. It does nothing in terms of, create any kind of opportunity other than to just basically profess this is where I am.
Yep.
Do you guys recall a period of time in your life when you feel like you felt that way about yourself, or have you always been about personal responsibility? And was there ever a transition, or do you think you were? Because sometimes I feel like it's
I feel like some people have it like early on,
Well, I feel like I think it's more common the younger you are. It's almost an immature way of thinking that I'm like this victimhood, like I'm a helpless kid,
Yeah.
And then as you get older and you trek through life a little bit, you start to gain a little bit more personal responsibility. Not always. Some keep going all the way till they're much older and they still feel this way. So do you remember a period in your life where you kind of felt like a victim and then you've transitioned out of that, or did you never feel that way?
God, that's tough because it was so
Probably not you, Justin. You're too white, so I don't think
Yeah.
yeah, you and Doug are
I
way
could
too.
never glom on
This question's more for Sal.
Yeah.
Sal, having immigrant parents.
You know
and
what?
Having
Nobody
dark
wants to listen to
complexion.
me
Did
talk
you ever
about it.
remember a time feeling sorry for yourself?
Yeah, you know, I didn't, but it was really never. It was modeled so strongly. My parents didn't talk. By the way, it's not like they sat me down and said, "Take responsibility." You know, you have to be empowered. You're not a victim. Nobody ever sat me down and said that to me. They modeled it so much. I mean, again, my parents came here. They were very poor, uneducated. My father, I think he went to 4th grade, and that was it because he was super poor. And he didn't sit there and complain about the fact that he couldn't speak the language, that he didn't know how to write and read in English, that jobs were hard for him to find. All I saw him do was go out and do it. And then when there were challenges, he always would be like, "What can I do?" And my mom was the same way. And so I feel like it was just
So it was already
modeled.
It was,
that way.
it was instilled in you.
Yeah,
at a young
without like they didn't say it. You know what I mean? Because I saw it that way, which I think why I grabbed onto fitness so much because it was this very like it fit that. Like
I was teasing you, Justin, but did you ever? I mean,
Well, because I mean, so I've noticed this too in the sports realm a lot, like in being around a lot of different coaches, and so the message was never like, you know, that they were never providing you with excuses and answers for your failures, and like to project that out and blame everything else. Like even too, like and because you're on sports teams, you're around a lot of different personalities, you're around a lot of different people from different backgrounds, social and economic backgrounds. Like, I was always immersed with like a very diverse group of people growing up, and even then going to Chicago, and like so, and that message just never resonated, that victim message, and it's just interesting to me. Now where culture has shifted so much of like there's none of these like underdog stories are being highlighted anymore in terms of like overcoming, adversity, overcoming the odds. It's just this, it's this sort of fodder that's just thrown out there to justify like anger and outrage against like a lot of the
success of other people.
Success of other people. So it's just interesting to me. I can't really say that I've definitely had like victim mentality for certain things, but I think it just was so modeled away from that.
You know what I love about sports? The one thing that I love about sports is in many ways it's an example.
Personal responsibility at the highest levels.
Well, it's an example. It's a nice representation of life, right? And so you can say whatever you want. You can have whatever philosophy you want, but if the team wins, they win. And the players that play the best tend to make the most money, and they tend to lead how other people should play. And then the teams that work together tend to do the best.
Not only that, but if you've played sports long enough, you've seen this example happen before where the gifted, talented, more privileged athlete is the starter and he's awesome and he's amazing. But then there's always that one guy on the team who isn't as gifted and talented, but then outworks him.
Yep.
And then takes that. If you played
and
sports,
we celebrated it.
That's right. If you play sports long enough, you've seen that happen. And I think to your point of like, it's a great representation of life because that does happen. It absolutely happens. There's absolutely people that are in a much more privileged situation and that are gifted and talented and don't have to put the work in as hard as the other people, and they naturally kind of rise to the top. But then there's always that guy who didn't have all that and ends up outworking that guy, and then it takes that position.
You know why in many sports it remains somewhat pure in that sense is because you watch their evolution and you watch the game. So you see what's happening. You see the hard work. You see the play. Like you don't see people arguing why LeBron James gets paid so much versus another player because you're like, well, obviously I can watch what he's doing.
Right.
I see what's happening. It's funny. Okay, with strength sports, you get more. And by the way, by no means is there huge victim mentality in the sport I'm about to mention, but you see more victim mentality in bodybuilding than you do in strength sports like Olympic lifting and powerlifting. Why?
Subjective.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll hear bodybuilders complain and whine more because it's judged. Whereas in powerlifting, the guy lifted more than you did. Like, what are you going to say?
Yeah.
There's nothing you could say about it. And in sports, you see that. So this is why you'll see people who will say, wow, CEOs get paid too much, but professional athletes and entertainers don't. Like you never hear someone say Beyonce makes way too much. You see how much she pays her staff versus how much she makes. You don't see that so much because people watch her perform. They see how talented she is. But this nameless, faceless CEO, nobody sees what they do behind the scenes, how hard they work, and how much value they bring to the company. All they see is how much money they make and how much the people who work for them make, and then they make these arguments. And that's they're trying to pour that into health and fitness. Now, you might want to ask why. Why do they want to pour that into health and fitness? Because it can sell you shit. You know how easy it is to sell somebody something when I tell you it's not your fault, it's everybody else's fault?
Because I have the answer.
I have the answer.
Yeah.
Here's the pill. Here's the thing. I know taking responsibility is really hard. Like when I had to sit down and examine my first marriage and some of the contributions I made to my divorce, that was hard. I had to sit there and be like, oh yeah, I played some roles in all of that. That's hard to do.
Right.
It would have in the moment, it would have felt good if somebody came to me and say, you did nothing wrong, Sal. It was all the other person's fault, right? And then I'm like, okay, good. I don't have to bear that burden. But then there would be no change. There would be no me moving forward. I wouldn't have become a better person. And that's the thing. So if you want long-term success in your own health and fitness, you got to stop blaming everyone and everything else. Bottom line, do some people have it easier than others? Yeah. That's a fact of life, man. That's just the way it works. Now what? What are you going to do now? You got to accept what you got, and you got to move forward anyway. You got to accept your genetics and move forward anyway. You got to accept the fact that you can change your nutrition with whatever tools you have, money, no money, whatever. You got to accept the fact that you can be more active or less active, regardless of the equipment and the gyms you have access to. You got to accept those things and move forward. And when you do that, you will accomplish long-term success. If you don't, you'll fail every single time. No one has ever succeeded long-term with that victim mentality in health and fitness.
Andrew, did you ever go through that? Did you go through feeling like a victim at any point in your life?
Yeah.
Yeah. From what age to what age? And when did you snap out of it? It's okay, Doug. High school.
And then coming out of high school.
Yeah.
It took me until my early 20s until I felt like I snapped out of it.
Was this when you got your girlfriend pregnant? If you don't mind me saying, was that that?
Yeah, my girlfriend pregnant. Things with my parents, things like that. More specifically, my father being absent in my life.
Yeah.
And then kind of blaming him. And then it took a while before I was able to recognize that, be aware of it, and then take things like in my own control.
Yeah. And when you did take those things into control, it was probably a big difference.
Yeah, well, it brought back like a lot of confidence
in
everything that I did, and fitness I think helped kind of bring me in that direction.
Yeah, so
I'd say the same time period for myself. It was probably, what's funny is I actually didn't think I was. My attitude or the way I thought.
Because in many ways you were also like, I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps at a young age.
And I did have that attitude, but then there was still a this undertone of victimhood too, because and what I would do is I would compare myself to my peers that were complaining about us now, and I'd be like, come on. Like that's what you're complaining about. And in my head, I'm going, I've been through so much worse. I've been through so much worse.
Like a chip.
Yeah. So I didn't realize it. I wasn't truly at that point in my life. Maybe I didn't think I had victimhood, but I didn't. Where I'm at now, I'm actually grateful of the disadvantages I had. Chew on that for a minute. Like I'm so grateful for all those things, and that didn't take until my mid to late 20s. Of actually going back and taking account of all the shitty things that have happened in my life, whether I brought them on my own or I inherited them or I had no control of them, didn't matter. What I realized was all the ones that I went through and overcame, I started to connect the dots to what that created in my life, or the character that it built, or the success that I had afterwards, and then what I started to see was like, whoa, the stuff that I think was like poor me or the shittiest part, the ability for me to work through that and overcome it, what I got from that was some of the most valuable things that I ever got in my life. And so then it started. So then I started to reframe, these disadvantages that either I had or that would happen to me in life. Because I quickly realized like, oh, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for growth. If I can this is shitty, this is unfair, this sucks, but man, it's a test. If I can make it through this and I surpass this or I overcome this disadvantage, then now I'm at an advantage because this other kid who was more privileged and didn't have to overcome that, he didn't build the skills that I had to build to overcome that. And I think that was like this major pivotal moment in my life, was to start to look at those things. So, and then now, and it doesn't mean that I think I'm invincible, or I don't have situations where I get down or frustrated and I have a moment of going like, fuck, that sucks. Why'd that happen to me? But quickly it shifts to, oh, here's an opportunity.
You know, something
and something great's going to come.
Something
from
you
this.
said right there was really important. Is you said, yeah, it sucked. Yeah, it was hard. Yeah, it was unfair. It's important you say that, because what people will do, the people who promote the victim mentality, what they'll glob onto is, well, you don't know how hard it is.
Right, that you don't have empathy for.
You
those
don't know.
people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's not at all what I'm. Look. I've made a career. We all made a career out of helping people through the struggle of obesity, through the struggle of poor health, through changing relationships to food, and all the reasons why the relationships to food were not ideal, or all the reasons why they weren't active and why they had poor relationships with exercise in their bodies. Like, we made careers out of that, and we were successful because we were empathetic. But we were also successful because we understood that I don't care who I had in front of me, and I don't care how great of I consider myself a pretty damn good trainer, and I got pretty good at the end there, but I can't do anything unless the person accepts that responsibility. I couldn't do anything. I can't do it for you, is the bottom line. And so that's the truth. So the empathy's there, but you know, it's funny, real empathy is like, man, that sucks, but also you can do this.
Yeah.
And that's
What
the only
can you do to improve things?
that's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Is if you do this. And so that's why I want to talk about that, because if you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, and you're not moving forward as a result of it, and you're pointing the finger at everybody else, you're going to be stuck and you're going to be dark. It's never going to change.
It's funny. I feel like I gave a terrible answer to you for that, but it's like, to me, looking back, it's really, I always thought everything was my fault. You know, ever since I was a kid, being the youngest and just having that kind of communicated to me from coaches or parents, or, you know, just like not living up to expectations and standards and things. And so I had a huge chip on my shoulder. And so I never really took that role on in terms of like blaming other people quite as much. But it was like getting out of that and like the guilt of that, and like taking everybody's shit on, you know, in terms of like how they viewed me versus how I view myself, and not having like, you know, that kind of, I had to build up my own self-confidence.
Well, that's an interesting point, because this is a product of potential being in a privileged situation, because you feel like, man, I have these other people that had way less than me, and they figured it out, and I haven't figured it out yet. I'm a loser. I'm this, I'm that. That's that voice that you're now starting to, or that conversation you're having with yourself, because you came from a situation that may be more privileged than other people.
You don't want to say you're a loser, because that's also being a victim. It's more like, I'm going to figure this out. Yeah. You know, there's two types of people, right? There's the person that looks at the success of someone else and says, how dare that person have that success? Who did they steal from? How did they cheat the system? They don't deserve that. I deserve some of that. Then there's the other person that looks at success and goes, wow, that's awesome. Look at what potential there possibly is. Maybe I can get to that place, or maybe I can get close to that place.
There's a spectrum of that, right? I feel like, because I mean, even us off air, when we're evaluating somebody we don't know anything about, I'm always intrigued by somebody who's had success.
Of course,
I always like I reserve judgment no matter how much I disagree with what they say, or I don't like the way they do stuff. I'm interested. If you found a way to have success, I'm curious. I'm curious to what worked in your life, and not a lot of people are like that. A lot of people see that and instantly want to look for the holes in those people and the things that are negative and bad. And I just have
you do that very well. Yeah, definitely, for sure. You know, this is maybe connected to it, but what's interesting is I'm starting to see that there seems to be an interest, or more of a groundswell, in kind of what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about, rejecting the victim mentality, accepting responsibility, and the things that you have control over. There seems to be something stirring in people and growing. And I do think it may be the result of the insanity over the last couple of years. I really do. Because I think now, looking back, now that we're kind of somewhat separated from the last, you know, just the unprecedented last couple of years, I think a lot of people are looking back and going, that was a little crazy. And I think you guys gaslit us a bit. And I think we overreacted. And you know what? I felt coerced. I could tell I was manipulated by fear. We did a lot of things that were stupid. I don't think I want to give anybody that power anymore. And I'm starting to sense it with people. People are starting to talk more about it. So speaking of like, being grateful for certain things, I think I'm grateful for the insanity of the last couple of years because I'm starting to see people are starting to say this kind of stuff. Looking back and going, why the hell did we do
very
some of this shit?
transparent now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came all out because of just everybody's fear and hysteria. It's like you could see what the result was.
Dude, I read an article.
decisions.
I read an article that enraged. So my wife, first of all, if people think I'm outspoken, you have no idea. My wife is. I joke with these guys all the time. If I ever ended up in the gulags, it was probably because of my wife saying something. Like she's way worse than I am. And I shared an article with her and some of my aunts, and they were just so pissed off because you guys remember when they were like pushing everybody to get vaccinated, right?
Yep.
And there were women that were coming out saying, this is messing with my menstrual cycle. My period is off. It's heavier. It's pausing. And people who were saying this on social media were getting shut down and blocked. And you can't say that. Don't say that. Well, now there's studies coming out saying, oh yeah, it definitely, it may in fact have an effect on women's menstrual cycles. I mean, the women in my family were so angry because it's like they gaslit the shit out of people. And that's just one example. So I think stuff like that is making people look back and go, maybe we shouldn't give people that kind of control.
How trustworthy are a lot of these officials in these powerful positions?
Well,